manifestation simply by glancing over material nature. One may argue that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who creates the whole cosmic manifestation simply by his glance, cannot come within the womb of Devaki, the wife of Vasudeva. To eradicate this argument, Vasudeva said, "My dear Lord, it is not a very wonderful thing that you have appeared within the womb of Devaki, because the creation was also made in that way. You were lying in the causal ocean as Mahavishnu, and by your breathing process, innumerable universes came into existence. Then you entered into each of the universes as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. Then again you expanded yourself as Shirodakashayi Vishnu, and entered into the hearts of all living entities, and even into the atoms. Therefore, your entrance into the womb of Devaki is understandable in the same way. You appear to have entered, but you are simultaneously all-pervading. We can understand your entrance and non-entrance from material examples. The total material energy remains intact, even after being divided into 16 elements. The material body is nothing but the combination of the 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Whenever there is a material body, it appears that such elements are newly created. But actually, the elements are always existing outside of the body. Similarly, although you have appeared as a child in the womb of Devaki, you are also existing outside. You are always in your abode, but still you can simultaneously expand yourself into millions of forms. One has to understand your appearance with great intelligence, because the material energy is also emanating from you. You are the original source of the material energy, just as the sun is the source of the sunshine. The sunshine cannot cover the sun globe, nor can the material energy, being an emanation from you, cover you. You appear to be in the 3 modes of material energy, but actually the 3 modes of material energy cannot cover you. This is understood by the highly intellectual philosophers. In other words, although you appear to be within the material energy, you are never covered by it. We hear from the Vedic version that the Supreme Brahman exhibits his effulgence, and therefore everything becomes illuminated. We can understand from the Brahma Samhita that the Brahma Jyoti, or the Brahman effulgence, emanates from the body of the Supreme Lord. And from the Brahman effulgence, all creation takes place. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the Lord is the support of the Brahman effulgence. Therefore, originally, he is the root cause of everything. But persons who are less intelligent think that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes within this material world, he accepts the material qualities. Such conclusions are not very mature, but are made by the less intelligent. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is directly and indirectly existing everywhere. He is outside this material creation, and he is also within it. He is within this material creation, not only as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, he is also within the atom. The existence of the atom is due to his presence. Nothing can be separated from his existence. In the Vedic injunctions, we find that the Supreme Soul, or the root cause of everything, has to be searched out because nothing exists independently of the Supreme Soul. Therefore, the material manifestation is also a transformation of his potency. Both inert matter and the living force, the soul, are emanations from him. Only the foolish conclude that when the Supreme Lord appears, he accepts the conditions of matter. Even if he appears to have accepted a material body, he is still not subjected to any material condition. Krsna has therefore appeared and defeated all imperfect conclusions about the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My Lord, your appearance, existence, and disappearance are beyond the influence of the material qualities, because your Lordship is the Supreme Brahman and the controller of everything. There is nothing inconceivable or contradictory in you. As you have said, material nature works under your superintendence, just like a government officer working under the orders of the chief executive. The influence of subordinate activities cannot affect you, since you are the Supreme Brahman. Everything is existing within you, and since all the activities of material nature are controlled by your lordship, none of these activities affect you. You are called Shuklam. Shuklam, or whiteness, is the symbolic representation of the absolute truth, because it is unaffected by the material qualities. Lord Brahma is called Rakta, or red, because Brahma represents the quality of passion for creation. Darkness is entrusted to Lord Shiva, because he annihilates the cosmos. The creation, annihilation, and maintenance of this cosmic manifestation are conducted by your potencies, yet you are also unaffected by those qualities. As confirmed in the Vedas, Harir hi nirgunaha sakshat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always free from all material qualities. It is said that the qualities of passion and ignorance are non-existent in the person of the Supreme Lord. My Lord, you are the Supreme Controller, the Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Great, maintaining the order of this cosmic manifestation. Yet in spite of your being the Supreme Controller, you have so kindly appeared in my home. The purpose of your appearance is to kill the followers of the demoniac rulers of the world, who are in the dress of royal princes, but are actually demons. I am sure that you will kill all of them and their followers and soldiers. I understand that you have appeared in order to kill the uncivilized Kamsa and his followers. But knowing that you were to appear in order to kill him and his followers, he has already killed so many of your predecessors, your elder brothers. Now he is simply awaiting the news of your birth. As soon as he hears about it, he will immediately appear with all kinds of weapons to kill you. After this prayer of Vasudev, Devaki, the mother of Krishna, offered her prayers. She was very frightened because of her brother's atrocities. Devaki said, "My dear Lord, your eternal forms like Narayana, Lord Rama, Hayashirsha, Varaha, Nrsimha, Vamana, Baladev, and millions of similar incarnations emanating from Vishnu are described in the Vedic literature as original. You are original because all your forms as incarnations are outside of this material creation. Your form was existing before this cosmic manifestation was created. Your forms are eternal and all-pervading. They are also self-effulgent, changeless, and uncontaminated by the material qualities. Such eternal forms are ever cognizant and full of bliss. They are situated in transcendental goodness and are always engaged in different pastimes. You are not limited to a particular form only. All such transcendental eternal forms are self-sufficient. I can understand that you are the Supreme Lord Vishnu." After many millions of years, when Lord Brahma comes to the end of his life, the annihilation of the cosmic manifestation takes place. At that time, the 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether, enter into the Mahat Tattva. The Mahat Tattva then enters, by the force of time, into the non-manifested total material energy. The total material energy enters into the energetic pradana, and the pradana enters into you. Therefore, after the annihilation of the whole cosmic manifestation, you alone remain with your transcendental name, form, qualities, and paraphernalia. My Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, because you are the director of the unmanifested total energy and the ultimate reservoir of the material nature. My Lord, the whole cosmic manifestation is under the influence of time, beginning from the moment up to the duration of the year. All act under your direction. You are the original director of everything and the reservoir of all potent energies. All the conditioned souls are continually fleeing from one body to another and one planet to another, yet they do not get free from the onslaught of birth and death. But when one of these fearful living entities comes under the shelter of your lotus feet, he can lie down without anxiety of being attacked by formidable death. This statement by Devaki is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita by the Lord himself. There the Lord says that even after traveling all over the universe, from Brahmaloka to Patalaloka, one cannot escape the attack of birth, death, disease, and old age. But one who enters the kingdom of God, the Lord says, is never again obliged to come to the material world. Therefore, my Lord, I request you to save me from the cruel hands of Kamsa, the son of Ugrasena. I am praying to your lordship to please rescue me from this fearful condition, because you are always ready to give protection to your servitors. The Lord has confirmed this statement in the Bhagavad Gita by assuring Arjuna, you may declare to the world, my devotee shall never be vanquished. While thus praying to the Lord for rescue, Mother Devaki nonetheless expressed her motherly affection. I understand that this transcendental form is generally perceived in meditation by the great sages, but I am still afraid because as soon as Kamsa understands that you have appeared, he might harm you. So I request that for the time being, you become invisible to our material eyes. In other words, she requested the Lord to assume the form of an ordinary child. My only cause of fear from my brother Kamsa is due to your appearance. May Lord Madhusudana, I wish that Kamsa may not learn that you are already born. Therefore, I request you to conceal this four-armed form of your lordship, which holds the four symbols of Vishnu, namely the conch shell, the disc, the club, and the lotus flower. My dear Lord, at the end of the annihilation of the cosmic manifestation, you put the whole universe within your abdomen. Still, by your unalloyed mercy, you have appeared in my womb. I am surprised that you imitate the activities of ordinary human beings just to please your devotee. On hearing the prayers of Devaki, the Lord replied, my dear mother, in the millennium of Swayambhuva Manu, my father Vasudeva was living as one of the Prajapatis. His name at that time was Sutapa, and you were his wife named Prishni. At that time, when Lord Brahma was desiring to increase the population, he requested you to generate offspring. You controlled your senses and performed severe austerities by practicing the breathing exercises of the yoga system. Both you and your husband could tolerate all the influences of the material laws, the rainy season, the onslaught of the wind, and the scorching heat of the sunshine. You also executed all religious principles. In this way, you were able to cleanse your heart and control the influences of the material laws. In executing your austerity, you used to eat only the leaves of the trees which fell to the ground. Then with a steady mind and controlled sex drive, you worshipped me, desiring some wonderful benediction from me. Both of you practiced severe austerities for 12,000 years by the calculation of the demigods. During that time, your mind was always absorbed in me. When you were executing devotional service and always thinking of me within your heart, I was very much pleased with you. O sinless mother, your heart is therefore always pure. At that time also I appeared before you in this form just to fulfill your desire, and I asked you to ask whatever you desired. At that time you wished to have me born as your son. Although you saw me personally, instead of asking for your complete liberation from material bondage, under the influence of my energy, you asked me to become your son. In other words, to appear in the material world, the Lord selected his mother and father, namely Prishni and Sutapa respectively. Whenever the Lord comes as a human being, he must have a mother and a father. So he selected Prishni and Sutapa to be his mother and father perpetually. And on account of this, neither Prishni nor Sutapa could ask the Lord for liberation. Liberation is not so important as the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The Lord could have awarded Prishni and Sutapa immediate liberation, but he preferred to keep them within this material world for his different appearances, as will be explained in the following verses. On receiving the benediction from the Lord to become his father and mother, Sutapa and Prishni retired from the activities of austerity and lived as husband and wife in order to beget a child who was the Supreme Lord himself. In due course of time, Prishni became pregnant and gave birth to the child. The Lord spoke to Devaki and Vasudeva. At that time, my name was Prishni Garbha. In the next millennium, you took birth as Aditi and Kashyapa, and I became your child of the name Upendra. At that time, my form was just like a dwarf, and for this reason I was known as Vamanadev. I gave you the benediction that I would take birth as your son 3 times. The first time I was known as Prishni Garbha, born of Prishni and Sutapa. In the next birth I was Upendra, born of Aditi and Kashyapa. And now for the 3rd time I am born as Krsna from you, Devaki and Vasudeva. I have appeared in this Vishnu form just to convince you that I am the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, again taken birth. I could have appeared just like an ordinary child, but in that way you would not have believed that the Supreme Personality of Godhead had taken birth in your womb. My dear father and mother, you have therefore raised me many times as your child, with great affection and love, and I am therefore very much pleased and obliged to you. And I assure you that this time you shall go back home, back to Godhead, on account of your perfection in your mission. I know you are very concerned about me and afraid of Kamsa. Therefore I order you to take me immediately to Gokula and exchange me for the daughter who has just been born to Yashoda. Having spoken thus to his mother and father, the Lord turned himself into an ordinary child in their presence and remained silent. Being ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva prepared to take his son from the delivery room, and exactly at that time, a daughter was born to Nanda and Yashoda. She was Yogamaya, the internal potency of the Lord. By the influence of this internal potency, Yogamaya, all the residents of Kamsa's palace, especially the doorkeepers, were overwhelmed with deep sleep, and all the palace doors opened, although they were barred and shackled with iron chains. The night was very dark, but as soon as Vasudeva took Krishna on his lap and went out, he could see everything just as in the sunlight. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that Krishna is just like sunlight, and that whenever there is Krishna, the illusory energy, which is compared to darkness, cannot remain. When Vasudeva was carrying Krishna, the darkness of the night disappeared. All the prison doors automatically opened. At the same time there was thunder in the sky and severe rainfall. While Vasudeva was carrying his son Krishna in the falling rain, Lord Shesha, in the shape of a serpent, spread his hood over the head of Vasudeva so that he would not be hampered by the rainfall. Vasudeva came onto the bank of the Jamuna and saw that the water of the Jamuna was roaring with waves and that the whole span was full of foam. Still, in that furious feature, the river gave passage to Vasudeva to cross, just as the great Indian Ocean gave a path to Lord Ram when he was bridging over the gulf. In this way, Vasudeva crossed the river Jamuna. On the other side, he went to the place of Nanda Maharaj, situated in Gokula, where he saw that all the cowherd men were fast asleep. He took the opportunity to silently enter the house of Yashoda, and without difficulty, he exchanged his son for the baby girl newly born there. Then, after entering the house very silently and exchanging the boy for the girl, he returned to the prison of Kamsa and silently put the girl on the lap of Devaki. He again clamped the shackles on himself so that Kamsa could not recognize that so many things had happened. Mother Yashoda understood that a child had been born to her, but because she was very tired from the labor of childbirth, she fell fast asleep. When she awoke, she could not remember whether she had given birth to a male or a female child. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 3rd chapter of Krishna, the birth of Lord Krishna. So this is a very beautiful chapter explaining the birth of Lord Krishna, and also explaining the wonderful qualities of Devaki and Vasudeva, and how many austerities they performed over so many years to have such a wonderful child as Krishna. And we understand that Kamsa was performing his atrocities as a result of seeing the omen came when Devaki was married, on the day of Devaki's marriage, and telling Vasudeva that the omen came to Kamsa and said that the 8th child of Devaki would kill you. So this is the reason why Devaki and Vasudeva have been locked up. So essentially now we move on to the 4th chapter, where it explains Kamsa begins his persecutions. Chapter 4. After Vasudeva adjusted things as they had been before, he carried Krishna to Gokula, and all the doors and gates became similarly closed. The gatekeepers awoke and heard the newborn child crying. Kamsa was waiting to hear the news of the child's birth, and the gatekeepers immediately approached him and informed him that the child was born. At that time, Kamsa got up from his bed very quickly and exclaimed, "Now the cruel death of my life is born." Kamsa became perplexed now that his death was approaching, and his hair scattered. Immediately he proceeded toward the place where the child was born. Devaki, on seeing her brother approaching, prayed in a very meek attitude to Kamsa, "My dear brother, please do not kill this female child. I promise that this child will be the wife of your son. Therefore, don't kill her. You are not to be killed by any female child. The omen was that you are to be killed by a male child, so please do not kill her. My dear brother, you have killed so many of my children who were just born, shining like the sun. That is not your fault. You have been advised by demoniac friends to kill my children. But now I beg you to excuse this girl at least. Let her live as my daughter." Kamsa was so cruel that he did not listen to the pitiful prayers of his sister Devaki. He forcibly grabbed the newborn child to rebuke his sister and attempted to dash her on a stone mercilessly. This is a graphic example of a cruel demon who would sacrifice all relationships for the sake of personal gratification. But the child immediately slipped out of his hands, went up into the sky and appeared with 8 arms as the younger sister of Vishnu. She was decorated with nice garments and flower garlands and ornaments. In her 8 hands she held a bow, lance, arrows, sword, conch shell, disc, club and shield. Seeing the appearance of the child, who was actually the goddess Durga, all the demigods from different planets like Siddhaloka, Charanaraloka, Gandharvaloka, Apsaraloka, Kinaraloka and Udagaloka presented her with various articles and began to offer their respective prayers. From above, the goddess addressed Kamsa, "You rascal, how can you kill me? The child who will kill you is already born before me somewhere within this world. Don't be so cruel to your poor sister." After this appearance, Goddess Durga became known by various names in various parts of the world. Yeah. Oh, it's a wonderful question. Thanks so much for asking. So essentially this is Durga personally. She flies up into the sky. So Devaki isn't interacting with Kamsa there to say, "Oh, please save my daughter." It's Durga flies up into the sky and she's communicating like that. But the reason why Devaki is explained by Prabhupada is the omen said a son would kill you. So now this is a daughter, so why is it necessary to kill the daughter who wouldn't even be able to vanquish you at all? It's the son that will kill you, and the son has been born in a different place. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of explaining it, for sure, because there's so many, when we have the care of another child, then perhaps we have a greater level of responsibility to them than their own child. as he explained that the family are all one and the same, whereas the protective level of another child would be on a heightened level. So it's a very good point for sure. Yeah, so the question is about Yogamaya and Krishna. So essentially, Yogamaya is Krishna's energy, as we were explaining in the last chapter about how Yogamaya is subservient to Krishna. Krishna is never covered by the modes of material nature, and indeed he's explained as Aja, or unborn. So Krishna is above the modes of material nature, he's above Yogamaya, and she is the servant of him. So it's interesting that they never actually meet, because whilst that Krishna has the capacity to put individuals under Yogamaya at certain point in times, he doesn't meet her personally. And now the different acharyas explain that in different ways, but essentially it's to help us to understand that Krishna is never under the influence of Yogamaya. But there are times, say for example, when the bewilderment of Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma is bewildered as a result of seeing, firstly Lord Brahma kidnaps all the cows and all the cowherd boys, and then as a result of that, Lord Balaram has a conversation with Krishna. What are you doing? You're doing so much. And then he explains the whole thing. All the cowherd boys and calves have been kidnapped, and so therefore I expanded myself. Ekam bahunam sham, for every single one of the cowherd boys and calves. So then, essentially, what happened to Lord Brahma, then Lord Brahma comes back on his swan carrier, and what he believed to be was just one moment, but it was actually a whole year had passed. So all the cows and the cowherd boys had so much loving relationship with their mother, because essentially it was Krishna in the form of these cowherd boys and calves. So when Lord Brahma flies back on his swan carrier, he sees this scene where Krishna in his Shama Sundara form, threefold bending form, is dancing there, and then he has multiple Mahavishnus dancing around him with four hands. They have the conch shell, the disc, the club, and the lotus flower in their hands. The four-hand Vishnu forms are all dancing around Krishna, and also hundreds of millions of demigods are dancing around Krishna as well. And then all the animals, even down to the lowest ant, are also dancing for Krishna. So then Lord Brahma is explained to be in this state, almost catatonic, or in that state of just so much bewilderment. His mouth is open, he's not understanding, because it's so much majesty to see Krishna in his Shamasundar form with so many Mahavishnus dancing, beautiful music. The Goswamis say there's also the birds singing. Kujat kokila hamsa saza sarasagana kiner madhura kule. So the cuckoos are singing, the swans, the hamsas, the mayura kule, the peacocks are dancing and cooing as well. And so this puts Brahma in a state of bewilderment. And so it was that point in time that Krishna decides to throw a curtain of Yogamaya over the scene to give Brahma a little bit of a relief, because we know Krishna to be inconceivable. Advaitam, Achyutam, Ananda, Anantarupam. So all the forms of Krishna are inconceivable, they're full of bliss, and they never fall down. So this curtain of Yogamaya is thrown by Krishna in a number of situations. We know also that when Krishna shows the universal form to Arjuna, the Yogamaya is also there. And then there's other... Yeah. Yeah, the whole material... Actually, that happens 2 times, because when Mother Yashoda is breastfeeding Krishna, then Krishna opens up his mouth, and then she looks down and she sees the entire material creation in Krishna's mouth. And then she becomes bewildered at that sight. And then in the second time, when Balaram and Krishna are playing with the cowherd boys, and then Balaram in his Vatsalya Ras, because we know Balaram to be the mainstay of all rasas. He loves Krishna in Shantaras, Dasyaras, Sakyaras, Vatsalya Ras, and Madhurya Ras, all the rasas. Lord Balaram, even, he's the incarnation Ananga Manjari, which is Srimati Radharani's younger sister, therefore facilitating the Madhurya Ras as well. So in Shantaras, obviously, he's all the paraphernalia, he's the bed, he's the chair, and then friendship, and then servitor. Lord Balaram behaves as a servant to Krishna. And also then what happens is this Vatsalya Ras is when Balaram acts as the older brother. And so he drags Krishna back to Mother Yashoda and said, he's been eating dirt, and accusing Krishna of eating dirt. And then so Mother Yashoda says, well, I have to check, opens up his mouth and then sees the entire material creation. So that's another instance when the Yogamaya, because it's too much for devotees to cope with. Prabhupada explained that we have like just a little drop and then that will give us some refreshment and be nectarian, but if we have too much then we'll be drowned. So it's just a matter of, taking it one step at a time. And these are the beautiful pastimes of Krishna. So it's explained Nitya Nava Nava Yamana. Nitya Nava Nava Yamana, which means we become more and more eager to hear the pastimes of the Lord. It's not like, I've heard already comes as, I've heard of this before. We actually become more and more eager to hear these pastimes. And we want to understand Krishna more. We want to, hear these leelas, because hearing is one of the most important activities. There's a beautiful Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. And so if we go back to understanding the benefit of Shravanam, or hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, firstly we go to our spiritual master Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he's explained that even if all the other books in the whole of creation were lost, we only had Srimad Bhagavatam left, then there would be no loss whatsoever. Every other book is contained within the purports of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and so we can get all of our understanding comes from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's a beautiful story in Bhagavat Mahatmya of the Skanda Purana explaining about how, because Shiva he's a Vaishnava Shiva Shambhu. We know Lord Shiva is one of the best devotee, the best Vaishnava. And there's a beautiful story where Parvati said to Lord Shiva, I wonder why you have so many of those skulls around your neck. And then so Lord Shiva said to Parvati, well actually these are all your skulls. So every time you've died I've put a skull around my neck. And so as a remembrance of you, therefore I choose to wear these skulls around as a garland around my neck. And then she said, well how are you immortal? And then Lord Shiva explains, well I'm immortal because I've been absorbed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I've been reading the Srimad Bhagavatam and therefore it's granted me the benediction that I've become immortal. So then Parvati says, well, is there any way that you can bestow this gift of immortality upon to me? And so then Lord Shiva, in his great munificence and his great compassion to his wife Parvati, says, yes, well let's go to this sacred place where you have to promise that you'll stay awake the whole time, and so that when I get absorbed in the Srimad Bhagavatam, just to know that you're listening, I want you to make a humming sound, hum, 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 hum. So they went to this very sacred place where no other people were there, no other observing. And so then gradually, because it's a 7-day sapta to read the entirety of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 7 days and 7 nights, like Shukadev Goswami explained to Parikshit Maharaj. So Shiva started singing the Bhagavatam to Parvati, and then Parvati fell asleep, but there was a parrot who was listening, and the parrot was so eager to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam that the parrot started humming, hum, hum, hum. And then eventually Lord Shiva said, like he saw his wife Parvati was sleeping, and then he saw this parrot which was making this feigned hum, hum, hum sound. So then Shiva gets up and he's chasing this parrot. So then the parrot flies off inside a hermitage at the same place where Vyasadeva is explaining the Srimad Bhagavatam to his wife, and his wife was in such a state of ecstasy that her mouth was open. This bird flies into the mouth of Vyasadeva's wife and then stays in her womb. So this is Radharani's parrot, Shukadev, and then this flies into the womb and then stays in there for the womb for like 16 years. And then eventually Vyasadeva is trying to get Shukadev Goswami to come out of the womb, but he's saying, no, I don't trust you, you're an attached householder, So I won't come out of the womb, I'm staying here. And then eventually it was Krishna who coaxed Shukadev Goswami out of the womb. And then as soon as Shukadev Goswami was born into the womb, he ran off straight away. So yeah, the Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam is very important for our Krishna consciousness. I was listening to a lecture of Srila Prabhupada entitled the Glories of Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada was saying, there's other yoga systems whereby, they tell you to meditate, but then of course the question is, what do we meditate on? So the process of hearing is so important that we can get Vishnu Smaranam, or we can remember Krishna by hearing. So we hear, and then we can chant, and then we can remember. So those are the three preliminary processes of devotional service. And they're not only preliminary, because Rupa Goswami said you can actually attain spiritual perfection in any one of the 9 angas of bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. So any of those 9 ones, like, our Namacharya, Haridas Thakur, he attained spiritual perfection from chanting 300,000 names or 3 lakhs of holy names every single day. So it's wonderful, this science of Krishna consciousness, and we're very fortunate to be here in the Association of Devotees. And so that was essentially a discussion firstly on Yogamaya, and then we went into a little bit on the glories of hearing. So perhaps if we just pick up where we went off. Yeah, sure. Yeah. 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 There's Yogamaya and Mahamaya. Yeah. 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 It's always also important to remember that every Vaishnava and Vaishnavi is worshipable. So as you were saying, to worship Yogamaya is actually bona fide according to Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So we can pay obeisances, take the dust of their lotus feet, offer them prasad, offer bhoga. Everything is completely bona fide because it's worship of the devotees. So yes, Mataji had a question? Yeah, so essentially Yogamaya is for the spiritual world, and then Mahamaya is for what occurs in the material world. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great clarification for sure. So, probably I shall be sent to the hell where killers of brahmanas go. I am surprised, however, that the celestial prophecy has not come true. It is not only in human society that false propaganda is found. Now it appears that even the celestial denizens speak lies, because I believed in the words of the celestial denizens. I have committed so many sins by killing the children of my sister, my dear Vasudeva and Devaki. You are both very great souls. I have no instructions to give you, but still I request that you not be sorry for the death of your children. Every one of us is under the control of superior power, and that superior power does not allow us to remain together. We are bound to be separated from our friends and relatives in due course of time, but we must know for certain that even after the disappearance of the different material bodies, the soul remains intact eternally. For example, there are many pots made of earthly clay, and they are prepared and also broken. But in spite of this, the earth remains as it is perpetually. Similarly, the bodies of the soul under different conditions are made and destroyed, but the spirit soul remains eternally, so there is nothing to lament over. Everyone should understand that this material body is different from the spirit soul, and as long as one does not come to that understanding, he is sure to accept the processes of transmigration from one body to another. It's interesting how Srila Prabhupada emphasizes this point of the body is different from the spirit soul. And indeed, one highly esteemed devotee in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya is VrajaPrema Prabhu. He's been a devotee for over 50 years now. And he said, in the original time with Srila Prabhupada, he was fortunate because he lived in the center of America. So what that meant, when Srila Prabhupada came, he literally closed down the whole temple, loaded up his van, and went to each one of the cities to follow Srila Prabhupada all around America. So he had that great benediction that wherever Prabhupada went in an American city, he was there to greet Prabhupada. And he said to Prabhupada, over 12 years he followed Srila Prabhupada every time he came to America. And so many times he approached Prabhupada with folded palms, paid dandavata obeisances, "Do you have anything special for me?" And Prabhupada's response every time for 12 years was, "Please believe me, you are not this body." So it's beautiful to come to that understand we are not this body, we're eternal spirit soul, and it's being emphasized here for sure. So my dearest sister Devaki, you are so gentle and kind. Please excuse me, don't be aggrieved by the death of your children, which I have caused. Actually, this was not done by me, because all these are predestined activities. One has to act according to the predestined plan, even unwillingly. People misunderstand that with the end of the body the self dies, or they think that one can kill another living entity. All these misconceptions oblige one to accept the conditions of material existence. In other words, as long as one is not firmly convinced of the eternality of the soul, one is subjected to the tribulation of being killer and killed. My dear sister Devaki and brother-in-law Vasudeva, kindly excuse the atrocities I have committed against you. I am very poor-hearted, and you are so great-hearted. So take compassion upon me and excuse me. So it's very important to understand here the beautiful Bengali proverb of Rakhi Krishna Mahike, Mahi Krishna Rakhike. So if Krishna wants us dead, nothing can save us. And if Krishna wants us alive, nothing can kill us. So it's beautiful here, echoing Prabhupada, no one can kill another living entity. People think that they can kill another living entity, but essentially Krishna is in control of everything. So while Kamsa was speaking to his brother-in-law and sister, tears flooded from his eyes, and he fell down at their feet. Believing the words of Durga Devi, whom he had tried to kill, Kamsa immediately released his brother-in-law and sister. He personally unlocked the iron shackles and very sympathetically showed his friendship for his family members. When Devaki saw her brother so repentant, she also became pacified and forgot all his atrocious activities against her children. So what's beautiful about the residents of Vrindavan is they automatically forgive, which is very beautiful, because often in this material world we know people, we've been in relationships that don't forgive us. So essentially Prabhupada explains that we should follow in the footsteps of the devotees of Vrindavan. So therefore we automatically forgive, and therefore we can live much more harmoniously in our communities, we can live much more harmoniously and happy and peacefully in our lives if we have this compassionate attitude of forgiveness. So Vasudeva, also forgetting all past incidents, spoke smilingly with his brother-in-law. See, it's automatic. As soon as there was a pleading for forgiveness, it was automatic. And Prabhupada was very much like that. If any one of his disciples committed anything wrong at all, he was automatically to forgive. And recently I read a letter that one devotee fell down from sannyas, and then he went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada said straight away, okay, you come back in the community of the devotees, no question whatsoever. So there was automatically forgiveness. Vasudeva also forgetting, yeah. Yeah, automatically forgiveness. And there's another beautiful statement that the GBC has said, because Prabhupada has said that I leave this movement in the hands of the GBC. And so the GBC has said that even if someone falls down and they goes away for as many years as they can, and then if they come back, they just have to say three things. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya, and the GBC is the ultimate managerial authority, and automatically they're forgiven. They can return back to whatever service they were doing previously. Yeah. My dear fortunate brother-in-law, what you are saying about the material body and the soul is correct. Every living entity is born ignorant, misunderstanding this material body to be his self. This conception of life is due to ignorance, and on the basis of this ignorance we create enmity or friendship. Lamentation, jubilation, fearlessness, envy, greed, illusion and madness are different features of our material concept of life. A person influenced like this engages in enmity only due to the material body. Being engaged in such activities, we forget our eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here is also explaining we create enmity or friendship. So some people we don't like and some people we like just on characteristics. However, if we go to Canto 7 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj, he explains that the demons actually politicize like that, or they create politics. Okay, this one's your friend, that one's your enemy. And Hiranyakashipu, his school was essentially to create a school of politics, where he believed Prahlad Maharaj would be a great politician, and so to be able to discriminate between who is his friend and who is his enemy. But there's a beautiful statement that Prahlad Maharaj makes, as he's one of our Mahajans. He explains that, you know, no one is my friend or my enemy, everyone is a servant of Krishna. And isn't that a wonderful realization? Because, you know, Lord Chaitanya spread around that sublime understanding of Jivera Swarupa Haya Krishnera Nityada. So everyone's the eternal servant of Krishna. So rather than looking upon differences and similarities, we just look on the basis of the soul. And if we go back to the Bhagavad Gita, it also explains the humble sage sees the most learned brahmana, the cow, the dog, and the dog eater all on an equal level. Pandita Samadarshina. So sees on an equal level all those different personalities. And that's the ability to rise above friendship and enmity. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's a very beautiful point about Srimati Radharani being so humble and having like the highest position, being the eternal consort of Krishna, and yet she has that great sense of humility. And Nrsimha Kavacha Prabhu came here and he said, if someone comes into the temple room and they just screw a nail or some small mundane menial task, Srimati Radharani, she says to Krishna, please look at this devotee, he's such a great devotee, or she's such a great devotee, look how much service they're doing. And yet Srimati Radharani is engaged in service incessantly. There isn't a time when she isn't serving. So, yeah, it's a beautiful point. Vasudeva took the opportunity of Kamsa's benevolence and informed him that his atheistic activities were also due to this misconception of life, namely taking the material body to be the self. When Vasudeva talked with Kamsa in such an illuminating way, Kamsa became very much pleased, and his guilt for killing his nephews subsided. With the permission of his sister Devaki and brother-in-law Vasudeva, he returned to his home with a relieved mind. So isn't that wonderful that the devotees have the capacity to relieve the minds of others? Because as Krishna says, those who don't put any living entity in distress, nor are they disturbed by the minds of others, are very dear to me. So Krishna explains that, and so therefore the Vasudeva and Devaki being a very advanced devotees, they're living their lives according to that. So rather than adding to the atrocities that Kamsa's committed, they actually provide some sense of relief to him. So as we can aspire to, in our everyday relationships, come to the compassionate level and help others to be relieved of their material anxieties. But the next day, Kamsa called all his counselors together and narrated to them all the incidents that had happened the night before. All the counselors of Kamsa were demons and eternal enemies of the demigods, so they became depressed upon hearing their master speak of the night's events. And although they were not very much experienced or learned, they began to give instructions to Kamsa as follows. Dear sir, let us now make arrangements to kill all children who were born within the last 10 days in all towns, counties, villages and pasturing grounds. Let us execute this plan indiscriminately. We think that the demigods cannot do anything against us if we perform these atrocities. They are always afraid of fighting with us, and even if they wish to check our activities, they will not dare to do so. Because of your immeasurable strength, they fear your bow. Indeed, we have practical experience that whenever you stood to fight with them and began to shower your arrows on them, they immediately fled in all directions just to save their lives. Many of the demigods were unable to fight with you, and they immediately surrendered themselves unto you by loosening their turbans and the tufts of hair on their heads. With folded hands they begged you to spare them and said, My Lord, we are all afraid of your strength. Please release us from this dangerous fight. We have also seen many times that you would never kill such surrendered fighters when they were all fearful, their bows, arrows and chariots broken, forgetful of their military activities and unable to fight with you. So actually we have nothing to fear from these demigods. They are very proud of being great fighters in peacetime outside the war field, but actually they cannot show any talent or military power on the war field. Although Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are always ready to help the demigods, headed by Indra, we have no reason to be afraid of them. As far as Lord Vishnu is concerned, he has already hidden himself within the hearts of all living entities, and he cannot come out. As far as Lord Shiva is concerned, he has renounced all activities. He has already entered into the forest. And Lord Brahma is always engaged in different types of austerities and meditation. And what to speak of Indra? He has a straw in comparison to your strength. Therefore we have nothing to fear from any of these demigods, but we must not neglect them, for the demigods are our determined enemies. We must be careful to protect ourselves. To root them out from their very existence, we should just engage ourselves in your service and be always ready for your command. So the demons are eternally fighting with the demigods, and there's a beautiful story where Vishnu one time intervened and allowed the demigods to reign supreme over the demons. So the demigods won, and as a result of that they became very prideful. We're the champions, we won, we're great. And so as a result they became puffed up. So Krishna, in the form of a yaksha, decided to test them. So Krishna comes in the form of a yaksha, and then firstly he approaches Agni and he says to him, "Who are you?" And Agni says, "I am the great Agni, I am the knower of all the Vedas, I can burn anything to smithereens." And so the yaksha, the Krishna dressed up as a yaksha, puts a tiny bit of straw in front of Agni, and he says, "Okay, burn this to smithereens." And so Agni, with all his power, with all his strength, with all his might, was not even able to put the flame on this tiny bit of straw. So he fell defeated, his pride was gone, and he went back to the demigods and said, "I don't understand, who is this personality? He was able to defeat me." So next thing, Vayu comes along and says, "That's okay, I'll be able to defeat him, I'm the wind god." So he approaches this Krishna dressed as a yaksha, and he said, the Krishna in his yaksha form says to him, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm Vayu, the celebrated wind god. I can blow anything in this entire creation." So Krishna in his yaksha form puts a tiny bit of straw in front of Vayu and says, "Please blow this." So with all his strength, with all his power, with all his might, he wasn't able to move the straw even a fraction of a millimeter. So Vayu stood defeated again. He returns to the demigods and says, "I don't know who is this personality. I'm so frustrated. Who is he?" And so anyway, Indra is the last person to appear. As soon as he appears in front of Krishna in his yaksha form, Krishna disappears, and there's Uma Devi explaining to Indra, saying, "This is Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He's the reason why you defeated the demigods." So then immediately that allowed the demigods' pride and arrogance to come back to like their normal level. And that is a reminder to us, whenever we succeed in life or whenever we do well, we should always pay obeisance to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada writes that one of the central tenets of our whole philosophy is the glorification of others and chastisement of ourselves. So even if we're, become the richest person in the world or the most famous person in the world, still thank you. It's all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Sri Sri Radha Gopinath. Never it is as a result of ourselves, because as soon as we think it's about ourselves, then we get puffed up and prideful. And there's a beautiful story with Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj, when they tour around Russia, and in Russia the crowds of devotees are very big. Often in temples, there can be 2,000 or 3,000 people for a kirtan. And so Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj, they used to carry him up in the air. And so they heard this story, you get the dust from the lotus feet of the spiritual master on your head, you make spiritual advancement. And he said a lot of the Russian men are like wrestlers. So they were hanging on to Bhaktivigyan Goswami Maharaj's leg, and so not letting go, like straight on the head. And they're very strong men. And so essentially Bhaktivigyan Maharaj, he said he knew in his heart he had to fold his palms, and with every ounce of energy he said, "Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada," straight away offering all the love and adoration to Srila Prabhupada. Therefore the pride wasn't able to build up in his mind, because anyone who would have their feet worshipped, loved in that way, would need to have some way to mitigate that. Especially on the neophyte platform. Madhyamadikaris might be able to be more self-regulated. Uttamadikaris, obviously, they already automatically think themselves to be so fallen. But neophyte devotees, always important to glorify the spiritual master and Krishna whenever we succeed at all. So we've gone a little bit over time today. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Jai Shri Radhe Gopinath. Sure. Yeah, the more senior devotees are very careful with what they say, because Yeah. Be careful with Vaishnava Aparadhs for sure. Because essentially that's what happened with Parikshit Maharaj. He put a snake around the neck of a young boy, and so he was a brahmana, and so he cursed Parikshit Maharaj to die within 7 days. So very careful with Vaishnava Aparadhs. Hare Krishna! Yeah.